CAPSI podcast series, Conversations on African Philanthropy.
Welcome to a very special episode with me, Beginkos Moyo. I'm today very excited to take this opportunity to use the platform, our Conversations on African Philanthropy, to talk about the work of CAPSI and introduce the different programs and the different colleagues that are leading these special programs. I'm currently joined by colleagues who are working on the academic programs, and I would want to start with talking to Professor Jacob Marty. Welcome to the episode.
Thank you.
Prof. Marty, I think it will be one of the special occasions for us as CAPSI to talk about CAPSI's offerings. And as somebody who came in a couple of years to CAPSI, been associated with CAPSI from inception, one of your responsibilities is to assist CAPSI to put together academic programs, but also to offer them in a way that is effective and efficient. Maybe let's start talking a bit about you yourself. Can you give us a brief summary of who you are and some of the specialization that you have worked on over time?
That's a difficult one all the time, but I'll try. I come from a social sciences background. My training straddles having a PhD in sociology, in political sociology to be precise, where I worked on social movements and the Kenyan constitutional reform struggles. I look at that particular project in multiple perspectives, both from a mobilization perspective of both resources and people towards the activism. And therefore, there are things to do with philanthropy. My master's was in development studies. Again, I looked at a global advocacy coalition that was looking at campaigns on MDGs. Again, a lot of it is oriented towards classic civil society, but a lot of it around resource mobilization. Then my bachelor's degree was everything in social sciences, political science, sociology, history, economics, everything at one point or another. And out of that, again, you find a lot of intersections of what we call, quote unquote, broadly development. After my PhD, I started more formal academic work in Wits many years ago as a postdoc and a sessional lecturer in sociology. Then I moved to the Pacific, taught social policy for a number of years before getting back to South Africa.
Great. And I think we'll come back to some of your publications that are instrumental to the work that we do now. But let's move on to Dr. Melody Mandevere. Again, same question to you around who you are, but also the areas that you specialize on.
Thank you, Prof. As you've already said, my name is Melody Mandevere. I come from a management background, and my master's in strategic management and corporate governance, and then my PhD still in management, where I researched on corporate social responsibility, focusing on the sustainability of projects that are being implemented by mining companies. So basically, that's me. And my research interests rest mainly on corporate social sustainability, corporate social responsibility, corporate social investment, sustainability, social entrepreneurship. And I think I would love to say from 2019, when on my first interaction with you, Prof, I remember it very well that day in March 2019, where my first meeting with you. You know, like when we're talking about philanthropy, it's something that we already know. But it wasn't something that I was directly dealing with or understanding. But from that day, then I began to look more into what is it, what are we talking about when we're talking about African philanthropy. And from that day, I began to develop much interest on African philanthropy.
Yeah. So when you talk about inheritance, there are some students that we inherited when we set up CAPSI, and Melody is one of them. So is Matemba, Wycliffe, Tele, and they're all here. So, but we'll come back to that. And so both Professor Marty and Dr. Mandevere are lecturers here at CAPSI, but also Melody, you also serve as a postdoc. Let's come to Joseph Subothongo. Again, let's hear a bit about you and also your background as well.
Okay. Like Prof said, my name is Joseph Lefa Subothongo. I'm probably one of the newest members of the CAPSI. I'm CAPSI team members, where I joined last year, November, from a different institution. But nonetheless, like my two colleagues, I also have a background in management, where I studied public management and governance, but only ended at my honors level and dropped off my masters. But I do have that background of my studies, which is in social sciences, but to be specific, governance and public administration, which is what I've focused on mainly in my life.
Yeah. So I wanted us to talk a bit about the academic programs. And obviously, you are here sitting representing others who are not here. For example, from the administrative side, we don't have Messi Moya, who is supposed to be part of the team. I'm told she's not feeling well. But we also don't have many other colleagues who are teaching different programs. I know that Professor Alan Fowler would have loved to be here and to talk a bit about the work that he's doing around para-academics. And he really did say that I should mention that so that the world gets to know that that's the other stream of work that we are doing. But let's start with you, Prof. Marty. Maybe talk a bit about the key focus areas from an academic perspective that CAPSI has put in place, and maybe do so within the perspective of what we are offering in this year and the years to come.
Okay, thank you very much. As probably many of you will know, the programs that we offer are being in a postgraduate only type of offering institution, or offering at a postgraduate level. And they straddle between master classes all the way to a PhD level. We have master classes in various either standalone type of courses that have already been developed, or we can do what we call tailor-made types of offerings in resource mobilization, in sustainability, in many areas that we're talking about. Then we have our certificate courses, again, which do borrow, or build upon what we offer the master classes at 3 different levels. We have Feather, which is Swahili for silver. We have Gold, and then we have what is the highest
bronze
one?
Is it the bronze one?
No. It's higher than that. But anyway, Almasi, yeah, diamond. Yes, thank you. The idea is that once you're able to do that, then you can come up with, or you get a qualification which is an equivalent of a bachelor's level as per NQF qualifications, and that would allow you, or becomes a feeder for those that may want to get into the postgraduate diploma and do not necessarily have the background, either in terms of practice and things like that. But the more formal programs that, again, we have been able to offer at the postgraduate level, we have the postgraduate diploma in philanthropy and resource mobilization. And what we try to do there is our targets are people who have been either working in the field, and by field we mean in philanthropy, in resource mobilization, in as foundation executives and things like that, or even in the corporate social investment type of things within the corporate world. We've had quite some good success in that regard. For the last, this is our 3rd offering, and students are going to various levels, either getting the skills and that they need to perform better in those particular roles. Then after that, we have our master's program in philanthropy, in African philanthropy, as we call it. There again, we're targeting some of those that have done the postgraduate diploma has actually transitioned into that particular program. But again, we are open to those that have been in the field. Some of them are CEOs of organizations or heads of organizations in various parts of the continent who either have completed, we are on the second offering currently, the first cohort which completed a little earlier, either last year, the coursework, and then some have submitted their research reports for examinations. I'm aware that one of them had just come back, and so we're likely to have our quote-unquote first graduate pretty soon. But the master's program is also offered either as a research-only type of offering. So you just come in, you do a dissertation, as opposed to having to do coursework and research report. And then we have the PhD program, which probably, given the way the center started, that was one of the areas where we had our first offerings, and we have more graduates actually on the PhD level who have gone through us, as opposed to these others. Well, probably not the master classes, because in terms of numbers, we've offered those because they are short and things like that. And the idea again is to deepen the scholarship on areas of African philanthropy and social investment. And I think we have had quite some success in terms of generating new knowledge, but also the manpower to be able to do this job.
Yeah, and obviously, Melody, you teach in some of these programs. What has been your experience so far, having to work in the space, but also to be part of the team that has been teaching the first set of students in the continent in the field of philanthropy and social investment?
Thank you, Prof. I think I would say it's been quite an honor to be connected to the very first cohort of this group. What I've noticed is that, as Prof. Jacob just said, we have a variety of students. We do have CEOs of companies. We do have some people who are just coming from the communities. In the moment that you start to interact with them, you notice that these people already have something on them. They already know something about it. In the moment that you start explaining what we're talking about when we're talking about African philanthropy, you really notice the interest that they have, to an extent that we have had students who started off as for diploma level, and some are now at master's level because they have noticed and realized the importance of African philanthropy, researching and reading about it. I think I've also interacted with other students who have also graduated from the master's level. As soon as they submitted their reports, they've already registered for PhD level. Why are they doing that? Because when you are conversing, when you're researching, when you're talking about African philanthropy, you see that it's a very important field where it was not being talked about. It was being practiced, but it was not being talked about. And as a continent and as a center, we have noticed that it's something really important. It's something that we really have to continue talking about. It helps us as individuals to understand some of the challenges. As I said, that some of them are already CEOs and they have the challenges that they are facing. And through our classes, you'd hear testimonies that are from that session that we have. I've been able to resolve the challenge that I was having at my company. So it's really been a great honor for us.
Great. And Joseph, from your side, from the administrative side of things, obviously, we do have the academics who teach and do supervision. But for that to go smoothly, there needs to be some very effective and good, efficient administrative support. Can you talk to some of the issues that you deal with on a day-to-day basis to make sure that the academic programs run smoothly?
Okay, Prof. Amongst other things, Prof, it's for instance, we have our classes which take place every week. We have a block release system that we use as an institution, especially for the programs that we offer. So amongst other things is to ensure that classes run smooth. The student experience, which amongst other things as an administrator, it's what we focus and pride ourselves in, is to make sure that the student experience from enrollment, from being interested in our programs to the point that you are able to attend class, that it goes smooth. And that goes with, as an administrator, is to ensure that our students are happy daily, meaning that the classes are scheduled, the information is provided to them, information on study material on the learning management system, those are also loaded. And also just working with the different lectures, which is the different lectures, the academic team that provide the sessions to these students. So you need to make sure that there is an existing relationship between you as an administrator, the lecturer, and the student. But at the end of the day, the focus for someone who's an administrator within academic programs is to ensure that the people that are enrolled within our programs get to experience the best student life during the time they are with us as a center.
Yeah. And then back to you, Professor Mati. I think one of the things I would be very much keen on as we begin to wind down is the composition of the academic team. Maybe not necessarily specific names, but who is the academic team comprised of in terms of whether it's experience, sectors, etc.
Okay. Our team is quite, let me say, quite mixed. And by mixed, I mean we have people who have been in the sector for a very long period of time as practitioners in this particular field, but also academics. And I think that also mirrors with Professor Fowler's project on pro-academics. You find some who started in the academia and went to the practice world and are now back in the academia, or some of us that went through the practice world and then are now into the academia. We have people who have been CEOs of extremely important organizations in the philanthropy ecosystem in various parts of the globe, here in Africa, but also in Europe and elsewhere. We have newer, or rather early career people like Melody. I can talk about people like Wycliffe, people like Dennis, and others who I think on the Nomatemba, besides others. I think what they bring here is the best of both worlds, to put it that way. From the academic world, those of us that are involved in day-to-day academic work, I'm talking about teaching, I'm talking about the type of research that we do, but also the practice world where they were able to. But besides that, being a niche area on the continent and pretty new, we have also built heavily on partnerships with others in the sector who are either within the continent as being practitioners. So these serve as sessional lecturers or sometimes as guest lecturers in each of the offerings that we have.
Yeah.
So we have that particular mix and with various associates across the world, actually.
Yeah. And so finally for you, Professor Mati, I mean, what would be the key strategic issues that you would say this year and going forward as the head of the academic program you want to pay attention to, and the audience and the people concerned must at least get to know about?
Okay. A couple of things. One is we've taken stock of our past two offerings. And one of the things that we've noticed is because our program started in the middle of the year and the university calendar has usually starts at the beginning of the year, we have had certain administrative challenges with the wider university community in terms of getting the transitions from when they begin to the next year when they are still continuing the same academic year. And therefore, what we've decided is to align our intakes to the beginning of the year so that it runs with the academic year of the university. I think that will help us avoid a lot of bottlenecks with the administration. They only register once at the beginning of the program, and then they are done for the year. Now, what that means is we need to have a specific set strategies in place to ensure that we reach out to our constituency, especially would-be students, but also lecturers, especially the sessional ones, so that we have that particular transition as smoothly as possible. Then number two, which is something that we planned from our annual strategic retreat is to ensure that we have a better tracking of our alumni. So that's one of the projects in the pipeline in the coming couple of months. Then the other is, again, taking stock. When the curriculums were developed, some of the things that were done was, yes, we did benchmark, especially with Europe and North America, because these are the areas where what we are offering were being offered. It's 2 or 3 years since we started these particular offerings. We want to take stock of where we are at. So one of the things in the pipeline is to have a conference where we discuss these particular issues, take stock, so that we can be able to improve. And out of that, for instance, some of the things that we've seen of necessity is to introduce a module, for instance, on women in philanthropy, which I think is quite urgent. But there are many others that have started to surface. And I think the more structured way of doing that is taking stock, and then we can be able to move that forward. So that's those. I would mention those 3 as key strategic areas that we are focusing on in the year.
Great. And to you, Joseph, what has been your experience so far at CAPSI, and there are new colleagues who have joined as administrators? What would be your word of welcoming to them?
I would say that one thing that I was told in my interview is that CAPSI works in a very fast-paced environment without you even realizing. For instance, if I'm allowed, we just recently held about 5 convenings, different convenings for different partners within a space of a month. And that requires a lot. It requires the team basically to work together. So the nicest thing about being part of CAPSI is that most of the people in the team know exactly what they are doing and what their daily contribution to the team is. So that, in a way, does make your life easy when you have to interact with the different people within the team. So I would say that has been one of my biggest highlights. It's very fast-paced. It's a very fast-paced environment. And you do sleep, but at the same time, you don't sleep. But if you do your work, and for instance, like you've introduced us, for example, to the quadrant system. I'm not sure if you've spoken about it in one of your podcasts before, but where we have to know what is important and what is important but can wait, and what is important but cannot wait. So we've had to also, like in me coming into and joining CAPSI, I've had to learn such things that, okay, this looks important, but it's not really important. And so such things, and at the same time, you have to be able to be a self-sufficient person, but you have a good team that you work with. So that will be my welcome to the new team members, that we do sleep, but half the time we don't sleep. So welcome to CAPSI.
So that comes from somebody whose last name is Subothongo, which means sleepiest. But Melody, back to you. And as we are winding down on this segment, because I would want us to move to the research function. What has been your experience as a postdoc? Because part of your functions here, or when you joined, was really to focus on the resilient urban communities. Maybe just summarize your experience over the last 2 years. Is it almost 2 years now that you have served as a postdoc?
Thank you, Prof. I think for me to be able to summarize the last 2 years better, I would start off as a student here. It's important for me to recognize the importance of CAPSI, particularly for me, because as Prof, you rightly said at the beginning, I think you mentioned that you sort of inherited students. And from the time that I was inherited, it's been quite an interesting time for me, because I got to manage to have collaborations with different colleagues with different experiences and different research expectations, and it has helped me quite a lot. And coming on to the Resilient Urban Communities project, which we started off in 2022, it's been quite a huge project, which we are in collaboration with some African and German universities, where we were focusing on social enterprises and non-governmental organizations as vehicles for resilient urban communities. And what we're doing is to try and look at the ecosystem with different work packages where we're looking at the literature concerning the social enterprises. We're looking also at the ecosystem, the governance systems. And all in all, I would say it's been quite a good time for me, because I learned a lot in the Resilient Urban Projects in particular, and from CAPS at large. I learned recruiting participants. It's not just like about going to anyone. You have to understand if that participant is going to give you the information that you want. How do you approach that person so that he is free to participate in that particular project? I also learned a lot about data analysis. How best do you analyze your data? You've already collected your data, but if you don't analyze it well, you may end up not getting the best out of it. So I also learned that. I also learned a lot about presentations, conference presentations. You know, like when I joined CAPSI, I had not attended any conference. So it was something very new for me. And I remember one of the days when Prof just said, you are going to present from a conference, so many people, high delegates there. And that's when I learned presenting at conferences. And I've actually learned a lot about presenting at conferences, both from CAPSI and from the Resilient Urban Communities Project. I've attended so many conferences. I think there are actually more than 4 where I've presented my project, my research. I've also learned about communicating your research results, where when you're communicating your research results, it's not just about communicating. You need to understand the type of people that you're presenting to. When you're presenting to the community, when you're presenting to the academia, you need to know how best to do that. And also, like at the end of every project, what is the community at large gained from that project? It's not just about like researching and then publishing, or just researching and writing and then we put it on the shelf. At the end of the day, we want to understand what is the community gained from that. Is it about policy change? Is it about the mindset? What exactly are we looking at? So I've learned all that from CAPSI and the Resilient Urban Communities at large. And one of the things that I've also gained as a postdoc is the teaching that we're talking about. It's been quite an experience having to be able to deliver some sessions. I remember this last cohort that we're teaching about landscaping African philanthropy, where I started off like from session one, I think, until the end of the module. It was quite an experience, and not only for those whom I was teaching, but also for me as the lecturer. It's been quite an experience for me, and it's quite an experience which I've enjoyed so much, and which I would love to continue enjoying.
Great. Thank you so much. So the context in which Melody is talking about the first big conference, this was the time when there were droughts in Mozambique, Malawi, and Zimbabwe. And as a center, we had requested Melody and Wycliffe to go to 2 different countries. Wycliffe went to Malawi and Melody went to Zimbabwe. And on their return, they wrote a report, and I was meant to present that report. And I think just 2 days before the conference, something just told me to actually ask them to present. And we spent a couple of hours downstairs on the eve of the conference, just rehearsing, asking them to speak to empty chairs. And that was useful, because at the end of the day, they had written the report, and I didn't want to be the one presenting it. And they did very well. In fact, Wycliffe ended up on the front page of the Sunday newspaper as a result of that conference. So, colleagues, thank you so much. I really wanted us to give our partners, our audience, a sense of what we do in the academic team. And maybe Prof. Marty, I would ask you to focus on that camera and advertise your programs.
Okay, that's good. We are the only center on the African continent that does what we do. And what do? We are a research and teaching center on African philanthropy. A couple of years ago, probably not even a couple any longer, it's a decade plus, when people like me, Professor Moyo, Professor Fowler, and many others that have been involved in this particular process were meeting in various conferences, especially ISTAR, International Site for Advanced Sector Research. We'd also always have an Africa Day sort of thing. And Professor Moyo was in the funding world. He gave us a lot of funds to do these travels from in Ireland, in Barcelona, in Turkey, in Italy, etc. And some of that work has come up in publications. At the time, there was always a feeling that we needed something more structured to have this particular type of scholarly engagements. But more than that, we also realized that those of us from the African continent that were doing these things were never formally trained to be in this particular space. And there was, as we talked to others, there was always the need that, yes, let's continue doing the scholarship. But more than the scholarship, we also need to train a generation of Africans who can be able to professionalize the sector and make it better to be able to deliver on Africa's development. And therefore, those ideas are born, and they become what CAPS is today, both as a research and teaching program. As I said a little earlier, we have those 4 or 5 tiers of programs. Our highest is the PhD, then we have the master's, then we have the postgraduate diploma, then we have the certificate courses, and we also have the master classes. All those, we have something to offer. You can come to us if you're an organization that, for instance, requires to develop a strategy on resource mobilization. We can be able to offer that particular support from either a tailor-made offering, or you can send your people into a longer-term program, either postgraduate diploma or even a master's program. And here I'm talking to the social investment units in our companies. I'm talking of the advancement offices in universities. I'm talking of CEOs and resource mobilization people in nonprofits and all that. Whatever level of interest, we have something to offer for you. And do reach out to us, and we'll be able to develop something or be able to advise on which is the best route that we can be able to go in terms of your needs. Thank you.
Thank you. And in terms of our academic programs, obviously some of the programs that we also want to champion are exchange programs. We recently signed an MOU with Urban University in the US. We also have an exchange program with Carleton University in Canada. And obviously, as we go forward, we would like to structure as many of these networks and partnerships as we can. So as we move to the research function, I want to thank you, Prof. Mati, Dr. Mandevere, and Joseph for taking the time to introducing CAPSI, but also your functions within CAPSI. Thank you so much. That was Professor Mati, who is currently the director for programs here at CAPSI, but also a lecturer here and a professor at the school. Dr. Mandevere, who is a postdoc, but also teaching at CAPSI's programs, and Joseph Subothongo, who is an administrator currently responsible for academic programs. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
You've been listening to the CAPSI podcast series, Conversations on African Philanthropy.